So the first item that we'll talk about is just the title of the file. Typically, you're going to be making lots of different spreadsheets, right? So you want to give it a descriptive name. So this one I called Basics because the point of it is to teach people the basics of Google Sheets. But when you describe yours, use descriptive words, and then that way, a year later, when you search for it, you'll be able to find it. All right, so after you've named your sheet, the largest thing that you'll notice in a spreadsheet is that it consists of this grid, and there are column letters and row numbers. And you should think of them in that order because if I'm going to talk about this cell, so I will make C3 the active cell, and I just did that by clicking it with my mouse. You call that C3 because it's where column C and row 3 intersect. You can also tell which cell is the active cell by the blue rectangle, and it's also up here in the name box, which we'll talk about in a minute. So spreadsheets can also consist of multiple sheets. Some people call them worksheets or tabs, but we're going to call them sheets. And right now we're looking at sheet 1. So if you move to the right and you click on the next one, here we'll see one that we called fixed reference. Because you can change their names, I just double clicked on it and changed the name earlier. And then this is sheet 3. So these all can work completely independent of each other, or you can reference them back and forth when you make your formulas. Let's go back to sheet 1. And before we go too far, let's just also look at this little triangle to the right of sheet 1. If you want to do something with just this sheet, chances are you'll be able to find it in this menu when you left click on there. Right, so you can do such things as copying it to another spreadsheet, or you could even change the color. All right, so I guess we'll do that just for fun. There you go. If you were to have 100 of them, you could use colors to help categorize them. So those are the essential parts of a spreadsheet you absolutely have to know. And next we're going to talk about the menu, which is this, and the toolbar. So think of the menu as having kind of everything that you can't just type into a cell. So if you want to put a value into C10, you don't need the menu. Just click 55, hit enter, and you're done. But if you want to, say, for example, format that 55, you have to go up to the menu. You find a lot of additional utility in these menus, things you can't really do from the cells. So one of them would be formatting. Let's just change it to a %. There's some other common items that are up here is if you want to maybe email this file, print it, or just get rid of it. Right, so we will go back, and the other item at the top is the toolbar. So what you see here, these are all shortcuts to things that are typically also found in the menu, but Google Sheets has made a pretty good guess on what you're going to use the most often. So if we're going to change the formatting again, you can do this faster by just coming up. We'll change it to currency. There we go. The third option that you could find yourself using to work with this data is just to, I'm using a Windows computer, so I'm going to say right click on this cell, and you'll see a list of options that are specific to whatever cell you have highlighted. If I wanted to delete a cell, in this case, it's talking about cell C10 because that's where I clicked from. And I could delete the cell from there. So I just said C10. You can also see that if you go up into the name box. So this name box kind of shows you where you are. So let's hold down the mouse key and select a range instead of just a cell. And now it's telling us we're in C10 to D11. You can also use this to name your range. I'll put a link in the description to talk more about that. But that's something more advanced, and you won't need that when you're first starting out with a spreadsheet. Now this spreadsheet already has some formulas. We will click in D3 where I know a formula is, so we can talk about the formula bar. So the formula bar always shows you the formula if there is one. Let's click in C3, or just a value if that's all that there is. But in D3, you can't tell if that's a formula just by looking on the face of the spreadsheet. But you always can in the formula bar. So when we click on that, you'll see it here. And if you have a very long formula, you can go down a little bit and just hold and drag this so that you can get a little more space to see it. Maybe you wanted that on another line. The formula will still work, but if you have let's say an if statement in here, it could be a lot easier to read if you separate each concept onto its own line. We'll put that back and click out of it. Let's highlight another piece of data here. So we'll highlight the range of C3 to C6 to show you what the Explore button does. And one thing that it does is it tries to guess what you want to do. So if you wanted to average all of those cells we just selected, you could just click on average and drag it in your spreadsheet, and now you have that formula. See, I already had that formula, so we'll do a more exciting one. How about max? That will show you the maximum value in this range of 1999. And the Explore button will also try to do some other things for you. Sometimes it guesses what you want, sometimes it doesn't. But it made a graph for us. Let's act like we want that. We'll put that chart right there. Shrink it down a little bit, and there you go. So that's the Explore button. It can be very handy. And if you're first starting out, it's probably a good thing to try to use. Delete that chart. And we'll talk about a few indicators just about the entire file. If I go up, one thing that you can do is star it. So this is maybe a familiar concept to you, but when you're looking through your files, you can have folders, you can have recents, but you can also have items that you've starred. So I left click on starred. You may do that if you don't really have a good place to put it. So maybe you have 1,000 files and you kind of know you're going to lose this one. You can star it, and then when you go to find it later, so if I go to File and Open, if you go to the Starred category, you're going to see it there. All right, so that's just kind of what you do with important or hard to find files. You can also move it around. You can move it to a different folder using this functionality. If you left click, it's going to bring up your file structure. All right, so this little icon of a cloud, if you're on a wired connection and you almost always have internet, you're never really going to look at this icon. Okay, but if you're traveling a lot, let's say if you're in a train, middle of nowhere, this may show that your document hasn't been saved for a while. And it will save when you get a connection again, but that can be relevant if you're collaborating with other users because they're not going to see your changes until it's saved. And you can see the last time it was saved by moving a little further to the right, and this was telling me it was saved 2 minutes ago. And if you need to revert back, let's say you made a mistake or some data changed and what you did wasn't relevant, you can click on this. It will bring up your version history and you can go backward in time. This is categorized by day, but you can also expand this. It's pretty granular and it has lots of different points that you can restore to. And if you are collaborating, so I have one other person that's sharing this document with me right now, and I can open up a chat window with this person where we can go back and forth. I could enter something there. Enter, it's going to show that I said that. And if we were to look at this as Michael, Michael would see that and he could reply through there. And now we'll come over to the activity dashboard and move down to the sharing history. So we can see that I made some changes here. And I first created this so just anyone in my group could see it. This is my little company. You may not have all of these options if you don't have a Google Workspace account. So if you're using this personally, it will work a little bit different. But one thing you can definitely do is you can share a link with anyone on the internet. And that's what I've done with this file, and the sharing history will show you that. Let's close this out. You can share this in a meeting. So if you're using the whole Google ecosystem, right? So if you're having a video meeting through Google, you can share the spreadsheet kind of in an integrated way with that. And then this is how you control who sees your spreadsheet and how they can interact with it. So I have another video that I'll link to that goes much deeper into the sharing options. But basically, you can specify who you share it with, or you can make a link and designate how that link behaves when other people use it. So this one is anyone can view it, but only as a viewer. So they can't get editor privileges. So when I share these templates online, I let other people get viewer privileges, but then they can make their own copy, which gets detached from this and use it how they like. And one last thing to pay attention to is this picture in the upper right-hand corner represents the Google account that you're using. If you only have one Google account, This isn't going to come into play very often, but if you have a work account, a personal account, and more, just make sure that you're using the right account here. If you left click on this, you'll be able to see who you are and then maybe see some other accounts that you also have on the computer. All right, so now that you know what the essential parts of a spreadsheet are, let's talk about working with rows and columns and how to move them around and what that means. I'll see you in that next video. Thanks for watching. It's nice to have you along.